I see a ballerina, and the look in her eyes as she looked at the stars. Who was the equal to have seen her from north or south or from anywhere else? There's a fire in her eyes, shining like a shield. There's a fire in her eyes, like a sword of steel.
Welcome to another episode of Baha'i on Air. Today we're filming at the Baha'i Arts and Spirituality Conference in Rotorua, and we're talking to Grant Hindin-Miller. Grant is a Baha'i author and musician from Christchurch. Welcome, Grant. Can you start by telling us something about yourself, please?
Most of my working life I've been involved in either teaching or creative writing expression. I've written a few books, scripts of 3 feature films, and 100 or so songs, words and music.
Wow, 100. I didn't realise that you had done so much.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And so tell us, where do you get your inspiration from for the songs that you do write?
From the ether.
From the ether?
Yeah, there is someone who once said that to a poet, poems are on the berry tree as they're walking past. And I think it's perfectly true that wherever you look, you can find inspiration.
So, Grant, what for you is the importance of having a conference of this nature?
The importance of a conference highlighting art and spirituality is that we have 2 natures. We have a material nature and we have a spiritual nature. And arts can be addressed to either one of those natures. I think most of us would agree that spirit is a higher, refined level of expression rather than purely material nature. And just as in the finest art addresses the finer attributes in a human being, that this conference is a call to remembrance that of the integrity and of the responsibility of the artist. Joseph Campbell said that the basic theme of all mythology, all ancient storytelling, is that there is an invisible plane beyond the visible. Mm-hmm. And in Māori tradition, art has always been regarded as tapu or sacred because the artist goes into po, which is into darkness, and brings back something into the world of light. Mm. And so the theme of the session I'll be taking is looking at the relationship between the fact that there is more in heaven and earth than is found in our philosophy. Right. and what we normally perceive.
Right.
When C.S. Lewis converted to Christianity, he was helped greatly by Tolkien, who explained to him that myth dealt with truth, and that the story of Christ was a true myth, a myth that was true, that it was indeed the Word made flesh. Christ said, "Ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free." Picasso said, and I'm not trying to compare the two, Picasso said, "Art is a lie that helps us see the truth more clearly." Surely one place where creative composition must reflect the will of the Creator is in the representation of truth, emotional truth, psychological truth, and historical truth. Carolyn Forshey, an American writer, said, "One of the things that I believe happens when poets bear witness to historical events is that everyone they tell becomes a witness too. Everyone they tell also becomes responsible for what they have heard and what they now know." And I would like to use her words as a springboard to sing a small pocket of songs for you. They're dealing with the plight of the Baha'is of Iran, who have suffered greatly over the last 150 years, and who, even as we sit here today, are experiencing serious deprivation. In recent weeks, some 500 have lost their homes, their possessions, their chance for education, their work and livelihood. And in recent weeks, one man was executed. He was a husband and a father of 4 children. So it seems especially fitting and right to bear witness to their plight here and now. In the graveyards of Iran, there's a perfume in the wind from seeds so harshly sown that never saw the spring. And in the shadows of Iran, in the wood and in the stone, there's a fragrance for each one who faced a rope or gun. There's lilac, lavender, jasmine, oil of roses, rosemary. Remember me sometime. Lilac, lavender, jasmine, oil of roses, rosemary. Remember me sometime. Father, I won't be home tonight. God's they came, I fight. It happened like you said it might. I told them what you told me. I said the earth is one country, and everyone is family. That all nations should live in peace, all religions too. And now I'm going to meet my maker. I'm going to meet my Lord. I'm going to meet my grandparents much sooner than I thought. And I know that I am favored and don't deserve this gift. Father, please remember me. Mother, do not grieve. Mother, I won't be home tonight. Gods, they came, I didn't cry. It happened like you said it might. I told them what you told me. I said the earth is one country, and everyone is family. That all nations should live in peace, and all religions too. And now I'm going to meet my Maker. I'm going to meet my Lord. I'm going to meet Baha'u'llah much sooner than I thought. And I know that I am favored, don't deserve this gift. Father, please remember me. Sweet mother, do not grieve.
Well, I was raised in a non-religious home in in some ways an anti-religious home, so there was no active religion, and my father described himself as a rationalist, and he always used to say that every church should be pulled down and 2 pubs put in its place. But when I reached the age of about 17 or 18 and began asking questions for myself, because spirituality was one area in which I had really never investigated or didn't really know much about, it was quite exotic to me, so I actually began looking at it. And with a number of friends, we would go to different churches each Sunday and have a look what was there. If a guru came to town, we would go and sit in and see what was being said. And a friend of mine became a Baha'i and shared some of the teachings with me, and I thought the teachings were sensible, and I thought they were really lovely. There was no way in the world that I would actually join a religion myself, because that would be embarrassing for me. And the whole notion of prayer was foreign to me. But after a year or two of considering it and looking at it, and not being able to fault it intellectually, which was important to me, it had to make sense, I very tentatively became a Baha'i, and my association with the Baha'i faith initially, this was in 1972, was fragile, and it wasn't until 3 or 4 years later that I really began to understand the significance of the teachings and really make a true commitment to it.
So it sounds to me like you came to the Baha'i faith through the head and not through the heart. Is that right?
Perfectly true.
Right.
Perfectly true. And the same process happened with my wife. When I married Jenny, she wasn't a Baha'i and had never heard of the Baha'i faith. In fact, the whole notion of getting married was quite foreign to her. But I said, if you want my body, you have to marry me. And so, we married, and she was obviously exposed to, Baha'i friends and Baha'i teachings and thought. And after 2 years of marriage, we attended a wedding, and it was a wedding of a Pākehā New Zealander, a European New Zealander, and a beautiful young Maori woman. And when she saw at the Baha'i wedding the blending of the 2 races, and saw the unity of the diverse nationalities at the wedding, she could see that the principle of unity that the Baha'i faith espouses was a practical living reality, and it was that which really opened her heart, and it was through that wedding that she became a Baha'i herself.
Now I've been a smiling lately, thinking about the world to come, and I believe it could be something good that's begun. And I've been happy lately, thinking of the world as one, and I believe it could be something good has become. So the arts are not just about the expression of talent or the making of pretty things. The arts are about arresting life and making it available for contemplation. Art captures the eternal in the everyday, and it is the eternal that feeds the soul, the whole world in a grain of sand.
So what was it that made you finally move from the head to the heart?
Well, that was interesting because I had been living in the country, and I came back to Auckland, and I came to an area where they were, in Baha'i administration, there are bodies called Local Spiritual Assembly, and they needed a 9th person to form this assembly, and they knew that I had a tentative association with Baha'i faith, although I had no active involvement. And they came to me and said, would I come along to this meeting. And I came and I said, yes, all right. And I came to the meeting and they had a small election and I was elected chairman of that assembly.
Thrown in the deep end.
And it was at that point that I had to say, I said to myself, I have to take this seriously or walk away. And I began to look to see what was really involved. And so it was through sort of like a position of responsibility, really.
Right. That you started to move from the head to the heart.
Yes. Yeah.
Right. And that's obviously never shifted ever since. Yeah.
No, it hasn't shifted, and it's become more and more important.
And so now you have a balance between the head and the heart, or does one of them tend to dominate over the other?
No, I think you do have to have a balance between the two. And I think that is characterized by the Baha'i principle of the harmony of religion and science. That religion is dealing with the unknown, and science is dealing with the unknown. But one has a more abstract, mystical expression of it, and one a more practical. And I think we definitely need a balance of both.
And things like arts and spirituality conferences are exploring the mystic side.
Arts and spirituality is a good analogy of science and religion walking hand in hand, because art is making manifest attributes and qualities of the spirit. When we look at religion and art have always walked hand in hand. They're both dealing with the unknown. They're both dealing with the mysteries of life. They're trying to make sense of human experience. And if we look at through the ages at great religious temples or churches, they have never ever been built solely for a functional purpose. They have always had rose windows, tall steeples, because to celebrate the sense of our need for imagination and celebrate the need for beauty, because beauty feeds the soul. It's an attribute of the soul.
So of all the music that you have ever heard, what would be your most favourite piece?
I really, really respond to the work of Bach. And Bach said that all of his compositions were composed to the glory of God.
And of your own music, what is the piece that you like the best? Of all the things that you have written, what is your personal favourite?
It was a very difficult question, Bev. Yes. There's one piece of the writing of Baha'u'llah which I put to music. I combined two separate writings of Baha'u'llah, one song. One is a hidden word, a book called The Hidden Words, and it begins, O Son of Earth. And the second part was a prayer, illumine the faces of thy servants. And I enjoy that song.
So it wasn't even your own words, it was words of sacred writings which you put to music yourself.
Yeah.
O Son of Earth, wouldst thou have me seek none other than me, and wouldst thou gaze upon my beauty, close thine eyes to the world and all that is therein, for my will and the will of another than me, even as fire and water cannot dwell together in one heart. Illumine, O Lord, the faces of thy servants, that they may behold thee, and cleanse their hearts, that they may turn unto the court of thy heavenly favors, and recognize him who is the manifestation of thyself, and the dayspring of thine essence. Verily thou art the Lord of all worlds. There is no God but thee, the unconstrained, the all-subduing, thy servants, that they may behold thee and cleanse their hearts, that they may turn unto the court of thy heavenly favors, and recognize him who is the manifestation of thyself, and the dayspring of thine essence. Verily thou art the Lord of all worlds. There is no God but thee, the unconstrained, the all-subduing. Baha'u'llah, Baha'u'llah.
The Baha'i writings put quite an emphasis on the arts, and you obviously draw on those writings quite a lot in your own work. Can you tell us some more about that?
It's beautiful, really, because Baha'u'llah said that art is worship. It's an amazing phrase, that art is worship, and it's one that requires, I think, a lot of contemplation. And what does that mean, that art is worship? He also said that music, he isolated music and said that music is like a ladder for the soul, that it has the capacity, and Beethoven said that music has the capacity to take us into a higher realm that we cannot understand, but which we are understood from. So Beethoven said that there is a realm that can understand us, that we cannot understand, that music has the capacity to take us and move us into that realm. And I think that is in harmony with Baha'i thought.
Blind thine eyes, that is to all save my beauty. Stop thine ears, to all save my word. Empty thyself of all learning, save the knowledge of me, that with a clear vision, a pure heart, and an attentive ear, thou mayest enter the court of my holiness. Thou mayest enter the court of my holiness.
It sounds like you draw quite heavily on what the Baha'i writings have to say about the arts. Can you tell us something about that?
I try and maintain an integrity of moral standard with what I write. If we look at, we talked before about beauty. The soul has a strong requirement for beauty, because beauty has the capacity to arrest us. It arrests us and affords us contemplation. And when we're all living in this busy, Western, screen-dominated lifestyle, it's very stressful. And art provides those small oases and pockets of contemplation and a remembrance that there is infinity, that there is eternity. It's like eternal verities. It reminds us, and when we're talking about the infinite or eternity, we're coming back to the Creator. We're coming back to God. So artists are in some way, whether they know it or not, envoys of the spiritual realm, because they remind us of its existence.
The Baha'i writings also talk about the prostitution of the arts. Can you tell us what you understand from that phrase?
When Baha'u'llah talked about music, he said that let us create music which will uplift the spirit and soul rather than relate to self and passion. So I would say that this distinction between the lower nature and the higher nature is that those things, those arts which are directed to self and passion are probably responding to our material nature, and those which are taking us to a higher plane would be the spiritual.
Grant, thank you for being with us this morning. I think you're due on stage in just a few minutes, so we'd better let you go. I hope your session goes really well.
It's my pleasure, thank you.
This morning we've been speaking to Grant Hindin-Miller, a Baha'i musician and writer from Christchurch. Thank you for joining us today for Baha'i On Air. We'll see you next time.